Hi again. So in the last video we took a look at these antennas on the rear of the machine and we had some fun when the recording messed up, but hopefully gracefully recovered. You guys got to see how all of these antennas were made. The next type of antenna or receiver that we want to put on this machine are the GPS receivers. Now this is written about in the book, like specifically. There's a scene where essentially someone's trying to take down one of these vehicles and spoiler alert, he's using his combat knife to pry the receivers off of the machine one at a time as he sort of hangs on to it like, action hero style. So that tells me two things. It tells me that these machines use multiple receivers and antennas for diversity and redundancy, and it also tells me that these are maybe 2 inches in diameter, 2.5 inches maybe, at most 3 inches. Little sort of half steel, half plastic, like hockey pucks that are fixed to the surface of these machines. Now we know that GPS uses line of sight of the sky, so these are not going to be placed down here near the wheels or anything. They're going to be on the top of the machine, sort of facing out at all sorts of different angles to the horizon. So I think the easiest way to create some of these is to start with a cylinder, put it in a null object, and then make a bunch of instances. So let's do that. We have our cylinder, 12 rotation segments, and let's make it have a radius of 1.75 inches. So 1.25, 2.5, let's do 3 inches diameter, and let's stick with that for now. So that's what they're going to look like, these little pucks. So what we can do is actually start a little bit of the shaping just so we know which way is up. And let's see, the caps, one segment. I guess that won't help us know which way is up. We can just model these later. So the first thing is to go to the side view and group it, and then move the axis of our group down near the base. So this does a couple of things. It gives us an object that we can instance that doesn't affect the geometry, so we can swap the geometry out later. And it also gives us this null object near the base, so we can use that to place it on the surface of other objects, even using constraints if we wanted to. So I'm just going to call this GPS unit. And now that we have one, we can start to figure out where the first place we're going to put this is. I think that there has to be one up near the other instruments. This is an array of instruments. GPS is just one of the things in that array. So we have one receiver right there, and just to keep with our asymmetry, let's put it off to the side. What we can do is sink just the bottom part of this in. That's going to help us later on when we do some of our modeling. So that should be a perfectly horizontal surface. So we're good. So that's one of the units. Where else would it go? Let's create an instance. And we can now move our instance around. So there's probably going to be one on the front fender, almost looking at the sky ahead, like that. Let's take a look at it. So it's off to the side. We don't want that. It needs to be at the center, so we can just set its X position to 0. So that's one of the units there. We're going to want a unit on either side of the machine here probably. And again, the theme for these was redundancy. In order to even make the vehicle retreat, the protagonist had to pry a series of these off, to the point where the machine lost confidence in its ability to have a redundant signal And you know, cell phones do this. You know, some cell phones have 2 antennas. Some cell phones will even have 2 different radios handling communication. So they'll have like a voice and a data radio in the same machine. So to duplicate this, I'm just gonna control drag it, and then I'm just gonna try to map its coordinates to the other side. So x would be -7. Heading would be -231. Pitch would, well, positive in this case. That would be 14, and this would be -22. I'm not great with coordinate systems. Let's see how that worked out. Didn't work out great. So I have the x position right, but I need to rotate it for the other directions. So what I'm doing is by making sure it intersects down here, I know that it's at least properly flat on the surface. It doesn't look so bad in 3D when things intersect, but it does look kind of bad when things are floating. So we have, if we were the sky looking down at this machine, we have a couple units there, one back here and one in front. What if we were satellites sort of low in the sky, near the horizon? We could see that one. What if we were near the rear of the machine, low to the horizon? See, we don't really see any. So I think we would probably want to put maybe I guess we can just put one there on either side and use a bracket to angle them out. Let's do that. So I'm just going to create another GPS unit, put it down here, sort of angled out towards the sky, under the machine like this. And again, I don't mind being corrected. So if you're an expert on GPS and I'm doing this wrong, let me know. So I'm just going to put one of them there. And then let's put another one down here. But what I want is I want to maintain that asymmetry we have. I like the asymmetry. It makes things look more deliberate. So let's put another one right there. Now we need a bracket for these. So let's pause real quick and make that bracket. The easiest way to make a bracket is just to take a piece of metal and bend it. In 3D, it's much easier just to take a cube and use that. So I just transferred a cube to the position of this unit, and I'm going to make it so it starts off at that size. And what I'm actually going to do is delete all the faces of the cube except these two. So I can select those 2 faces. I can do an invert selection. I have a shortcut for that. And then delete. So now what I have is sort of an angled bracket. And I can then use this to put it down below the unit and quite easily grab the edge of the other piece of material. And I can then sort of start modeling my bracket. So if I scale this piece down, move it over here a bit, I can sort of create that position where it fixes to the swing arm, and then I can just control drag, and we have this other position here where it goes along the swing arm. And at that point we have a bracket. All we need to do now is make it have thickness, so, and sort of round the corners a bit. So the way I typically do that is with the extrude tool. So all I need to do is select all, well, or select none, it works the same, and press D for extrude and tell it to create caps. What this is going to do is, if I don't have create caps on, it creates me a hollow object. If I do have create caps on, it gives me a solid object, and I want a solid object. So I can create an extrusion of maybe 1/8 of an inch. So I can just type in 1/8, gives me an 1/8 of an inch material. And then I can select my antenna, move it up a little bit. And we can start smoothing this out a little bit. So what I would do is select that loop and that loop, go to wireframe mode so you can see, and select my bevel tool and bevel it just once. It gives it a nice bent appearance. So it looks like someone actually bent it into shape. And then it's not often brackets have sharp corners like this left over. The humans that created them don't like getting nicks and cuts while mounting them on the machine. So we can just do another bevel near those corners and just smooth things out a little bit. It makes it a little bit more realistic. And we can then take our line tool, our knife tool in line mode, excuse me, and using visible only as a cutting filter, we can just sort of start to cut this to get rid of those n-gons. N-gons aren't bad, but they have a tendency to unpredictably triangulate sometimes like this. So if we have a more deliberate way we'd like to triangulate, we should. So that's one bracket, just like that. We would sort of complete the effect by putting a bolt right there. Make it seem like it's bolted on. We can also reduce the Phong shading angle to maybe 60 degrees, and it sharpens it up a little bit so all the edges are sharp, except where we deliberately smoothed. And so that's a bracket there for a GPS unit. And the other antenna, oh, looks like I never copied it, I just moved it, so we need to copy it back. So I can hold Control this time and copy it. Oh, I see. If you... Interesting. Not sure why it didn't let me copy it from that view. Either way, we can select this antenna. And again, these antennas' jobs are to sort of provide a view of the sky when there's a low visibility to the front and the top, and we're sort of depending on the edge of the horizon behind the motorcycle. And we can use the exact same technique we just used to make a bracket for this antenna as well. Oh, it looks like I moved this one. It's okay, we can just move it up on the y-axis and then use the XZ to slide it around until we found a good center. And we can select this antenna right here. And then we just use that same technique to create a bracket for this. So let's do that again. Let's see if I can do it a bit more quickly. So I'm going to transfer the cube, scale the cube down to the right size, convert it to an editable object. I might want to rotate this one so that it's facing the correct way. It's facing up to the surface that I want to bolt it to. And then we delete all the faces of the cube except 2. And once we've done that, we can move the cube down to the base, and then we can use edge mode to move that part of the bracket to where it needs to be. Oftentimes we would also want to rotate it a little bit, sort of twist it. So what would happen is these brackets would be made out of a semi-flexible material, at least when they're first being created. And what would happen is if after mounting it, it's not quite at the right angle, I suppose maybe one of the engineers would sort of just bend it so it is at the right angle. Sort of a final calibration, if you will. And so we can bring this out. If you right click, it moves things in relation to the camera's coordinate system, which is quite handy. So you can move things around in screen space by clicking and dragging, but if you right click and drag, it moves it in relation to the camera's focal plane, which is quite fun. So now that we have that, we can do an extrude again with the create caps option on. This time we'll go downwards, And we still want 1/8 of an inch, so 1/8, or rather negative 1/8. So these normals are reversed this time, so we want to select all. I have a shortcut UR for reverse normals. We go to our loop selection, we bevel this bracket where they bent it, and then we go to the wireframe mode, and we will select these edges and do a bevel on them as well to get rid of the sharp edges. So we can select these n-gons here and just press UE because we're happy with them. And then we can come over to these n-gons over here and tease them into shape by making a few cuts. And now we have 2 GPS units at the rear facing different parts of the rear sky. It looks pretty good, although this unit really should face more like that. So we'll either have to recreate that bracket or just bend it into shape. I think we can just bend it. So we can just grab those polygons that I just selected and just sort of twist it into shape. So I'm going to go to edge mode. It's kind of hard to see what's going on. But if we just do a few rotations, we just want to make sure it's aligned with the actual position of the sensor. Then we can go back to the perspective view and shaded mode. And although it looks a little bit stretched because we know what it's supposed to look like, I think that'll work. What we will need to do though is fix this kink by just moving this edge. And so what we can do is just select this face and just move it in a little bit. Maybe we move it edge by edge, just to make sure that the geometry doesn't fall apart right there. So that's a lot better. So now we have 2 GPS units looking that way. And not much in the front. Down here, maybe we want one on either side below the has cam, sort of just looking forward. We definitely want something facing forward. Like right here somewhere. Either way, maybe we can revisit that. Maybe we have enough sensors for now. So these 2 cubes, I'm just going to select them and call it bracket. And then we have our GPS units. So let's go to our original GPS unit and do some modeling. So I'm just going to press C to convert it to an editable object. Select all the points. Optimize, and then I'm going to do a loop selection and use my bevel tool to sort of round it off a little bit. So I'm going to do a big round like that, and then I'm going to come in again immediately and do another one so that it has this angled yet rounded look. And for now I think that's good. Now all of our GPS units have that rounded look, and of course, you know, if we wanted to get into a lot of detail, we can put like a wire coming from this unit going back to the center of the bike. But for now, I think that's okay. And I think the last thing we want to do is put some has cams on the back of the bike. So we probably only need 1 has cam, but the problem is that the back of a bike can get pretty dirty. So we're probably going to want to put it somewhere where it won't get very dirty. But maybe we can just leave that until next time. We spent a lot of time positioning these GPS units, and then we created these nifty little brackets down here. So I think next time we might focus on maybe more of the armor plating, or perhaps placing some has cams on the rear of the bike in a spot where they won't get completely splashed and destroyed by the rear wheel. Because, I mean, these have some pretty sensitive instruments on them. So, I hope you enjoyed this one. This was a shorter video, and until next time, see ya!